Chris, welcome.
Hi.
We're going to take a half hour and kind of deep dive into your background, philosophies on VR.
Excellent.
Life story, family history.
Right.
Medical background.
All right.
Anything
this is going quite deep.
Personally identifying data, that kind of stuff.
Right. So go through my entire search history.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I did my research.
Great.
So for the benefit of everyone else who hasn't seen the search history.
Right.
Could you briefly go through kind of the genesis story of how you got into the crazy world of virtual reality for us?
Right. Have we even discussed this?
This is, I've heard bits and pieces, but
it's one of my better friends in VR, Julie Hayter from VR Unicorns. It's her favorite story.
Oh yeah.
It's quite embarrassing and dumb, but I moved from Australia to Belgium 15 years ago or so, and was living on my first project with my work in Italy, when one day this doorbell rang and I'm like, what is this? And it was this weird Belgian guy coming to live with me. Like, he said, I'm coming to live with you now. I'm like, this is super weird. Like, okay. But he ended up moving in, and that was Dirk, my now colleague at iIllusions. 12 years later, he spends most of the next 12 years making video games. He launched a game on Steam called Elemental in 2011, I think. And my job with him was basically to be his support friend guy who would just do stuff occasionally, mostly nothing. But then 4 years later, 2015, Valve sent out the prototypes of the then Vive, and within a couple of weeks, Dirk had made this prototype called Space Pirate Trainer. Asked me, Chris, there's this really weird thing. I made this demo and I put it up on a forum, and now Valve wants to fly me to Seattle. This is in December 2015. And I said, that's crazy, Dirk. I still hadn't seen VR, commercial VR at that point in time. I'd seen it in the 90s, like when that first wave came through, but it didn't interest me then, because it actually made me sick as a kid. Yeah. Kids don't get sick, I did. So 2015, Dirk calls me up and says, I have to go to Seattle on Monday, this is Friday, and they've asked me to bring my team to demo this thing, and I don't have a team, and you're probably busy, but can you come to Seattle and be my team? That's how I got into VR. The next day I met you, and I had to pretend I knew what I was doing. And I've been pretending ever since.
Don't we all? I mean, so I think it's an interesting background, because I think we both share that same story, which was we were not, a lot of people like Denny Unger of Cloudhead have been living their whole lives thinking, I want to create the holodeck, and that the sci-fi future that I want to envision, now is finally our chance at commercial VR. And both of us kind of got swooped in around the early days of VR and said, yeah, let's build something interesting, because I like doing. Yeah,
the first time I saw Dirk's really rough prototype of Space Pirate Trainer, I knew there was no way I would ever do anything again. In seconds, I was converted to VR.
So the game that you're currently continuing to work on is the first game that you ever played in virtual reality?
The first thing I did in VR was the Blue.
Okay.
Which is the whale demo, which I guess a lot of you might have seen. That was just before there was already a prototype for Space Pirate Trainer, but that was the first thing I did, and that was quite convincing to me.
So you got thrown in at that Steam Developer Day, and everyone there had been deeply ingrained in that. Did you kind of feel like you had walked maybe into a cult?
It was totally. I remember this is the launch. I think the press launch of the Vive. Yeah. So they'd flown in all these fancy people from American publications. New York Times was there. Polygon, Tested. All these amazing titles were there, and there was this background audio. I don't know if you remember that. There was this hum. It sort of sounded and looked like we were stuck in a DVD loading menu. This whole blue scale. Yeah, I did feel totally out of my depth.
I think that's what, if you give a sound designer the task, what does the future sound like? And then they hand over an asset.
DVD loading menu, yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a wild way to get started. And do you have any memories of kind of like the experiences that you had in that first year that converted you to, this isn't just something that I'm doing as part of my career trajectory, but more like this is the thing that I want to continue forward doing?
So I've always been interested in gaming and making games. Honestly, the first 6 months crash course in the last 60 years of VR design was intense.
Yeah.
Like, there's been a lot of work by a lot of amazing, talented teams for a long time. Like, this is not a thing that started in 2013. This is a thing that started in 1950s. The first experiments with crossed realities, whatever they call it now. But yeah, the crash course in catching up with you guys was tough. Because the Cloud had been doing this for so long, and the gallery project, which is a masterpiece in my opinion, that had been through so many different iterations that by the time our little team came up with our demo, well, Dirk had been working on that for 2 months. By the time it was shown at the Vive launch, it was a brand new product.
And from what I recall, Chet Falachek of Valve just called up Dirk and said, "Hey, I think you would be a good person to make something weird."
Yeah, that's how it happened. He had played Dirk's flat game Elemental and thought, well, let's try it out. I think a number of indie developers got one sent to them in late 2015, and that was all done by Chet.
Yeah.
He pushed that. He went through interesting titles he found on Steam, went through developers that had a relationship already with Valve, and sent out a whole bunch. That was the genesis for Audio Shield.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of games that started out like that.
So you got thrown in the deep end and started working on a launch title for all these, essentially a multi-platform game that it's on every platform. Can you share? I know in the previous panel you talked about things that worked, things that didn't work. Do you have any kind of more specific stories of something that you all thought, oh, we're going to add this to the game, it's going to go great, and it clearly needed to be cut?
Well, every development cycle has limited time, right? So with our original pitch, we wanted to consider maybe multiplayer. And this was a big thing, we wanted to try it. And a lot of people demanded it, but it is really, really, really hard. Everyone actually in game development knows that multiplayer is hard.
Team of 3, right?
Yeah, it's really hard, and in VR it's especially hard. And so that did not ever make the cut for Space Pirate Trainer. We experimented with it, we played around with it, but it was not a thing that we could ship with.
How about the reverse? Something that you go, you know what, I'll say yes to someone implementing this, but I don't think it's going to work. And
that was the PlayStation port.
Yeah.
So for a long time, we thought there's no way Space Pirate Trainer can work on PlayStation.
Yeah.
And we'd shipped the game. The game was complete on PC VR, and we just thought no. It took us 6 months.
So was that tracking, controllers, perf, or all three?
It was a concept. Space Pirate Trainer is about movement in a space, and PlayStation VR is marketed as a sitting in a place. Yeah. And so we just didn't see it as a platform fit. And that was one thing. Then there's actual technology required. So there's one camera for tracking in PlayStation VR. Yeah. We require you to see an entire room. But an amazing team helped us in Belgium. These two guys from Glowfish Interactive helped us realize that we'd made a terrible mistake, and it totally works on PlayStation. You can do room scale. It's a smaller room, but you can do room scale tracking with the PlayStation VR pretty well. So we had to work out some new ways of implementing a chaperone system to prevent you from going outside of the track zone, but it works.
Yeah, we saw the same early friction, or at least in our minds, it's like, well, Job Simulator, how's that ever going to work, right? Because the same thing, you have to be able to move about the space, but a Frustum, you can work within the math of the constraints and just make it work with enough design and engineering and just grit to
with Job Simulator, a lot of rework went into that, so you had to change the entire construct of the kitchen. I just recently found out that the microwave in Job Simulator is completely remade just for the PlayStation port, and also for the small person mode, human mode. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to do.
So you changed the enemy wave structures for PlayStation, or is it the same?
It's the same. So we did small tweaks to them, but the general gameplay itself, absolutely identical. And that was really important for us. So we didn't want to have a different experience. We didn't want to have a lesser experience.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons why we were surprised that it worked. Because it is the same game.
Yeah, it's impressive. Can you share anything about how many people have kind of gone through the PlayStation version versus kind of the other platforms?
Sharing numbers, we haven't got that data to share to it yet. But
Okay.
let's just say the PC has been really good for us,
Yeah.
and we're still experimenting with PlayStation. Trying to find yourself on a store like that for us has been difficult.
Yeah.
But it's still an important part of our revenue stream. It's just that, like for some people that have been speaking today, PlayStation is their number one store.
Yeah.
And it's similar to, I think Callum was talking about it before, there's a bunch of titles that are the top titles and everything else sort of falls down.
Right.
And so we haven't yet reached the top titles in PlayStation.
Yeah, the store cliff that
Yeah.
he was talking about, which I guess dovetails nicely into Quest. So we've been talking about Quest a lot. I think to people who haven't been watching the industry, it kind of came out of nowhere. Whereas I think for people who've been in the pit, it's been the most anticipated form factor for the future of VR.
Yeah.
So do you think that, we're only a couple weeks in, do you think it's changing the whole landscape? Do you think that the Quest is the start of a new sector?
Yeah, I know in the last talk I said Quest like 10 times.
Yeah.
Well, I'm personally really invested and excited about this product. I don't see it being the harbinger of like a brand new, I don't see it selling crazy. I still think it's a complicated thing to sell. I can see it selling more. Like I have one in my backpack just now, and I showed it to my sister last night. She'd never seen it, and was like, "Finally, I can get VR." But she'd already been converted to it with me taking my backpack PC and all that sort of stuff in the past. This is not my first trip to London with VR in my backpack, but it is certainly the smallest backpack I've ever had with VR in it. So I see this as like a good stepping stone to being more inclusive and getting more people engaged and just trying VR for the first time. Because that's what's required. You can't sell VR very well with just an image of someone playing it or a screenshot. Yeah. You have to experience it. And that's what the Quest does. It makes showing that experience or giving someone that opportunity for that experience a whole lot easier.
Yeah. We've been having discussions at panelists over the past few days about how the Quest, showing people the Quest for the first time has been kind of the easiest sell to get people interested in VR so far. And so contrasting that, we were talking before about the title that everyone's using, the VR Winter. So I know you have thoughts on whether the VR Winter is real, how long it will be, what your predictions are. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
For me, that whole, I didn't talk during that, I kept my mouth shut because I thought, no, don't. The VR Winter is entirely a construct of the VC fundings. Like, it's got nothing to do with actual players. There are players who continually buy games in VR. But the hype cycle of 2016 wasn't driven by them. It was driven by investment. And the expectations then was that VR would explode for some reason in 2017, 2018, and of course it's not going to explode. It's not a thing that can easily be translatable to a new player. You have to have experienced it to try it. And in the tethered environment of people's Vives being at home, they have to physically come to your house to try out VR.
Yeah.
That's not going to work at all, and it never will work. That's why the Quest is a little better, because now people in this room could say, hey, Chris, can I try out your VR thing? And it's possible now. Yeah. But it's a hard sell. But progressively, that will get more and more normal. It'll be more common to have a VR headset in your backpack or on your phone or however it is in 2023. But this whole winter of VR, I think it was just false expectations and management of what people really expected.
So do you think that, let's say the winter is an investor winter,
yeah,
do you think that the progression of VR without any outside investment will continue linearly growing and that it'll naturally...
I believe so. So there is still a huge amount of investment from the vendors, like HTC is super into this, Oculus obviously as well, and Sony as well. But the hype cycle of 2016 from venture capitalists, I think, wasn't actually that good for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, on the previous panel, we're talking about analysts overblowing expectations, which then led to investors thinking that those are the expectations to meet. When they fell short, then they said, oh, VR's dead, and it didn't hit the expectations. But all those expectations were built from false guesses as to where it would go.
That's right.
Whereas the developers who are looking at the hardware are going, okay, this will take a while.
Yeah.
We need to stay small.
Yeah,
You remain 3 people for a reason.
Did
right?
not expand at all with the
Yeah.
success of Space Pirate Trainer, knowing that it's going to take some time before this becomes ubiquitous. VR is a medium that's only just starting.
Yeah.
And to expect it to get everywhere before the end of like 2020 is crazy.
So then, I mean, the next logical question would then be, if you've got a popular IP, where do you go from there? Are you talking about what you're doing next?
No,
or
we're
what
not
you're
talking
doing?
about that just yet.
All right.
So it's soon.
Yeah.
We have been working on new stuff. I think officially we can say we're working on cool new stuff.
Cool new stuff.
Cool new stuff.
So where do you see, you get these kind of analyst prediction type questions. I guess the easiest one to think through is what advancement in the hardware, platform, software, or ecosystem would you want to see happen next to kind of create a better market?
So back to the Quest thing. I'm super excited about the fact that this can exist in any space you want. So like you can now do VR right over here or over there or outside. What I expect and anticipate is a merging of what we've seen out of AR in the last few years, like the Magic Leap and the Quest. I see a merging of those techs where the Magic Leap has the ability to do a point mesh of your entire room, and the HoloLens does this as well really well.
Yeah.
And the Quest is doing it to an element as well. It's doing a slight mesh of your environment to work out where a safe play space is. But that will converge. I'm almost certain of it. Those tech, and there's a talk at the OC5, the Oculus Connect 5 last year. One of the keynote points was that Facebook or Oculus see themselves as an AR company as well.
Right.
And that they see the low cost of entry of having a Quest could be a much better way of doing AR. So you just have better cameras and you can simulate the actual world that they're in.
Right. Yeah, I've heard it described as you either black out the world and then start to integrate real-world elements,
Yeah.
or you start with transparency and start to additively add content to that.
And personally, I'm more excited about a virtual space that also understands where I really physically am.
Right.
And so I am curious to see how that evolves in the next few years, but I think that will be the major turning point for VR.
Okay, so here's a crazy question. An angel comes down and gifts you a $100 million fund to invest to make the VR AR ecosystem better. Where do you put it? Big AAA content, small indie content, lots of bets, or push toward hardware research to more advance, where we are?
The hardware advancement will happen organically. You can't rush that. I don't think. I mean, maybe you can, but my understanding is this is making things smaller.
Smaller, faster, lighter, cheaper.
Yeah, and that can't be rushed.
Yeah.
That requires understanding new physical properties of materials, and you can't just throw money at that.
Yeah.
Or you can, but it can be very expensive. So I personally am more excited by the investment in small indie guys, getting more teams, more people with new ideas to make crazy content. That's how you make amazing experiences. And so far, we don't really have that sort of funding mechanism to get cool teams doing cool stuff that easy.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a chicken and the egg problem, which is to get investment for a piece of content, they want a vertical slice with the mechanics proven out, with it built. But where's the funding for getting to interesting mechanics and throwing out
getting people who
out of
haven't
10?
had experience or had the need to have experience. Like I am super lucky that Dirk had time and some absolute luck that our game that was only 8 weeks old got on as a Steam Early Access title. That was our golden nugget, and thanks to Valve for letting us do that. We managed to survive from an early stage as a profitable business. But most teams don't get that lucky break, like just perfect timing. So, yeah, investments in small teams is really important.
Yeah.
And luck.
Yeah, and luck, yeah. So I guess to kind of close out, you're not talking about exactly what you're doing next, but would you say that it's continuing to kind of go back to the basics of let's invent new mechanics and try
Absolutely.
to get
So we've been
weirdness
experimenting
out
we've been playing with the core mechanic for Space Pirate Trainer for a long time, but also investigating new ones. We really, really love space, like physical presence, and space, I guess, with floating asteroids and stuff, but we really like movement. And so that's one of the things that we've been experimenting a lot with, in large spaces, small spaces, long spaces. But movement in VR, movement in virtual spaces is so exciting. And
yeah.
that's where we've been focusing, and that's what we want to play with more.
Yeah, we were joking about how doing a 360 turn or doing a roll feels like you're cheating now.
Yeah, right.
Now that there's no wire, you keep thinking, oh, I got to get wrapped up in the cables, but now it's all gone.
Cable management is gone now.
Yeah.
I still feel like people who have come back from war and lost a limb have the phantom limb. I have the phantom cable.
Yeah.
It's real, but it's gone.
These are all the things that, like from the last panel we were talking about, is that adults have to unlearn, whereas kids just get the natural, smooth path in. So they'll think everything's untethered, completely wireless, small form factor on your head, and everything just works.
And that's really totally normal, and I can't wait for that to be totally normal for them.
Hell yeah. Can't wait. Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.